Say again?
All of the vehicles that we replace, I think it's essential. Now, if something comes up like an ambulance and we want to donate it, is that handled? Is there anything?
Well, the thing is, normally we would try to sell it to somebody, just like this last one. We tried, the fire, it was a fire, that's how what it was, about a fire truck. If there's somebody else that needs it and it's really nominal return, it makes sense for us to do it, but we don't go out and say, hey, Friday, you need it or whatever. We may go to Ken and A and say, hey, we got this available. But,
I saw a TV that was like a paper about this guy giving stuff to
Nice.
no, I didn't see that one.
I didn't have that problem.
Center Start?
Oh, he found out his, well, I don't have time to play
Yeah,
with
Center
it.
Start. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call to order first the special session for the Sierra Vista City Council. So, Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Mayor, the special meeting was rescheduled to 5 p.m.
so
so that
we'll
we
do that
could
at
add an
5.
item. So we're starting the work session at 3.
Okay, got it. All right, so we'll start the work session at 3.
Excellent.
Thank you, Jill. Keeping me on target there. I was ready to move right along. So I'll call to order the work session for June 12th, 2018. Everybody is here. Rachel is on the way, so we'll pretend she's sitting there. We need to continue our discussion, reference the 2018-19 budget. And was there any presentation from staff?
No, Mayor, the presentation was concluded yesterday, so today is for any staff questions that, I'm sorry, council questions for staff that may exist.
Okay,
Right.
so then I'll open it up for council for any additional questions.
You want to go?
You can start.
Yeah, Mayor. I'd
Okay.
Like to, thank you. So I realize that a lot of the costs that are in the budget are relatively fixed, or I flat out agree with the expense, and I think the return on investment would be well. I do have some questions for the departments, and what I'm looking at is once again just kind of going through and seeing where there was some increases to some things, and just trying to get some clarity of what those could be, because we don't have it fully broken out. So I'll start with this. So like within the city manager's office, specialized supplies, $3,500.
And Councilmember Mount, what page number are you on?
Page 99.
Thank you.
I don't want to like go through each one of these, but I assume what I'm looking at are the travel and training and printing and binding, which in this case has stayed the same. And if there was any new increases that were up, and I don't want to come in and necessarily just take anything from the staffs. I know they've done a good, or from the staff. I know they've done a good job of paring this down as best as possible. But I want to see if there's any cost savings that we could ask for as a council, if somebody's willing to budget a little bit here or there, so that maybe we can get some of these other things funded. So, and some of it's just because we get asked questions. I'm not sure what specialized supplies we have going into the city manager's office, but and then travel and training. And this, I guess, can just kind of be a blanket question. So as you work through the departments, printing, for example, we know that we had the rate increases with the recycling. Is there something that we can do to curb out some of the printing costs that we have as a city to help do our fair share of reducing the footprint of paper that's going to go out there into the community and end up either in a wastebasket or in a landfill? Is there something we can do?
Well, there's always things we can do. We had an energy task force, for example, and look at ways of saving energy. So we can always bring our folks together and look at how we can reduce paper usage as well. I don't think it'll have a huge budget impact, but we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I'm looking for, again, just the money where we could save, even if we can get $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 somewhere that could be used just in case for example, if something like the airport radar was something. I know we have a contingency for that, so hypothetically that. But if we could find enough savings now and then hopefully some at the mid-year to put it back in somewhere else. So I'm asking those questions. Do we have anywhere else where we can go through and clean out some of this? So for example, within the finance division, the travel and training doubled from last year. Is that an absolute need or a requirement? Are we good with it going up by 50% versus 100%? Same thing with, I know the software piece is in there. That's a doubling. I got some more here.
Does she have one?
So office supplies, for example, over in economic development, $41,000 for office supplies. Just want to know what that's for.
Mr. Mallon, if you could just wait a few minutes, we'll get all the breakdowns.
Oh, I didn't know there was,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, we have the information, it's just not in the book.
I'll stand by.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll just share with the public too, a lot of these questions are answered in a one-on-one session, and where the staff does have oodles of information that's extra, and when they don't have it, they can access it relatively quickly. So some of us have heard these answers before, but it's good to put it in the public face.
Well, if we have, I'll hold.
Well, and really, things can be changed, absolutely. So, if we have a target in terms of the consensus of council for, in addition to the budget, then we can go back and pare through the budget. I mean, work doesn't have to be done right here.
My target is 50K. I'd like to get that airport sign, and I will try to find it.
Is that the cost of that sign?
That's the estimated cost.
I have the two for your budget and my budget.
No, that's fine, Dave, but, there's a proposal on the table, and
Oh, okay, I'll make it real.
Work session, there's not a proposal on the table. He's trying to figure out how he can come up with 50K, and that's fine, but that's not a proposal.
well,
Table parliamentary speaking.
well, I know I can come up with 50K,
But answer the questions, and then if he wants to make a proposal that we spend 50K on the sign, then that's another item of the discussion.
The city manager's specialized supplies, there's an error in the spreadsheet. That same error appeared last year. Last year, if you look in the 2018 published budget, 2018 has $3,500, and the prior year is blank. We discovered that that'll be fixed in the final book when we're verifying it. And the finance additional training is for the implementation.
Wait a
of the-
second, David,
Sorry.
let's one at a time here.
Yeah.
So you're saying the 5,300 should
The
not be there, should be
3,500
zero?
no, it should be 3,500 in 18 and 3,500 in 17.
So it hasn't changed, so the
Has
question.
not changed.
The question still comes, and I don't want to speak for you, Craig, but this question still comes, what is that specialized, what are those specialized items?
Those tend to be the office supplies, things like that, that the city manager gets for various things that they do. Specialized supplies is kind of, they don't,
I hesitate to ask this, but are there any other calculation errors in the budget that we have?
the current year budget foots, because that has a screen to foot to. The prior year does not foot, but that was discovered because we're verifying the $500,000 decrease in the city manager budget.
Okay.
What does that mean? Foot?
That means when you add up the individual spreadsheets, all the individual pages, it equals the amount that's on that summary table on the earlier page, and that matches what is in the system. There's not a summary table for FY17 or 18 in the spreadsheet.
So then I guess, I can go through each one of these, but there's, and I'm willing to. I know it's a work session. I don't want to necessarily monopolize the time and single any specific pieces out. We can, but I guess the challenge that I would have is I want to get some projects done and off the plate. That's the goal that I have. And so the Airport Commission followed the process, so did some of our others. I would like to see one of those commissions get one of the things that they brought up as a community, as volunteers, and brief this council. I want to see one of those projects get done. So I would like to find $50,000 somewhere in the budget. It can be intermixed between our advertising, our printing, our professional associations, our travel and training, office supplies. Y'all know best what you need in your departments. But I'd like to get that sign built so we can start really marketing the town and do something that is going to help us so that we can reinforce these tourism discussions that we keep having, or we got all the people coming in to use the ball fields. I'd like to have something there. And I also think it's a safety issue, not to just, spike that football. I drive up there to that commission meeting every month. The sign that's currently there is very small. You're already getting into a turn lane with people who are moving fast, and I'd rather just have a little bit more of a marking there so people know where to turn.
There's also that tree that obscures it front when you're coming down from the north.
Yeah.
So one way it would be to cut that tree down. But another thing I want to add to what you're asking is if this were reworded to say, we feel it's very important to have the sign, and maybe there are some other items, then could we then turn that back over to you and you figure out how to pull up the dollars to do that instead of going through trying to find through each department? You've mentioned in the past that, and I hesitate to bring this up because I don't understand how it's done and all, but that there's probably dollars in the budget that are not strictly accounted for as you go through it. Is that a fair way to say that?
Well, Mayor Mueller, Councilmember Calhoun, certainly, in and of itself, $50,000, out of $69 million isn't a large amount. Yes, we went through the O&M budgets with the individual council members last week. You saw the areas that were requested that were generally over what ended up in the budget, and we brought that back to actual expenditures that we encountered last fiscal year. So there really isn't a lot of growth in terms of O&M budgets over and above what was done, but we can certainly go through maybe swap out or do something with some capital items, perhaps. That would be probably an easier way to go about finding the money than combing through the O&M budgets.
The thing I want to mention about specific projects here, I understand that we're probably not going to spend everything that's budgeted, and we're probably going to have money available or money that can be reprogrammed throughout the year, because we've done that almost every year on different occasions. My concern is really with just the $50,000 figure, because I would agree the sign needs to be larger, needs to be taller. I'm not sure that a reader sign, which is what was originally proposed, with people going 55, 65 plus, we're going to have a reader sign that's as big as the ones by the Speedway as you're coming south from Phoenix to be able to read. So I'm not sure the 50,000 figure is appropriate. However, I don't have a problem with raising the sign and making it more visible. That's been needed to be done for a number of years.
That was just my opening offer, Mayor. Okay. So if you want to negotiate, we can work it out. I
just mentioned that if we do get the AWAS system, at least we have one to meet your goal.
Yep.
We at least have one commission getting something that they've asked for already. So this would be a second thing if they do that. So I don't have a problem with raising the sign to an appropriate height and making it large enough, making it more in line with what we have at the entry sign and style, etc. But I'm not sure the 50,000 price tag is there.
Well, because this is airport associated, we do have the $200,000 budgeted for the removal of the dirt. As I mentioned at yesterday's meeting, we're looking to defray those costs by using private developers and others to haul the dirt. So we could probably fairly easily reduce that to $150,000 and budget $50,000 for the sign, since it is airport related.
Yeah, and I think the idea of the sign, one of the things that I kind of liked about the idea of it, or else I wouldn't be pushing it. This isn't be belligerent about the sign was put out there. The sign that's out there is beautiful, it's lovely, it's fantastic. And I'm talking about the big one that we just
Or you talk about
erected.
the entry sign.
Yeah, the big, it's static, and I get it. What they were talking about was something that could be, and there's some marketing in here that we can use. So it's a new sign. They want the kind of the, not just a reader sign, but one of the newer signs that actually shows, hey, we have these events going on. And it's not necessarily where it's every 30 seconds flipping around, but it's saying this is what we have going on in the city today or tomorrow or the next week or whatever. And it's something that you can take all this money that we're spending on marketing and give it another tool to go back into. That is something that I think is appealing. I think that's something that come nighttime, you tone it down so it doesn't disrupt everything. I mean, that's all possible with technology. But I like the idea of, as people are coming in and out of the city, we're marketing to the people who are driving down. We're going to have a lot of people. Look, we have to build on success. So if you're successful in getting these people to come into the town, then we need to have layers to capture every last bit of them that are coming in. And I think it starts with that sign, and that airport sign's got to be updated anyways. That's kind of the first net, so to speak. That's the justification for it.
Did you have something? Go ahead. All right, so your recommendation then is to take 50 from the pile.
Reduce the dirt
Dirt pile.
removal.
Anybody
budget.
have any objections to that? Why don't we go ahead and put it in the budget, and
That's fine.
we'll do it on a final vote.
I have a question about and I'm looking at the hotel taxes. There's some discussion right now with SEHA, the Southeastern Arizona Hospitality Association, for those who don't know, about putting in a bed tax to sort of raise funds. They're not quite at this point now. They're in the process of doing a survey because they want to get all the hotels, if they want to volunteer to tax themselves, they would like to make sure that they are on the same page. So I will give you that. But here's my question. Right now, we as a city tax the hotels, and I'm looking at the city rate, and it is 5.5%, which is higher than nearly every other city in Arizona. Can you talk to me about that?
Well, one of the things you got to be careful of is there's two ways to tax in the bed tax, and we went through this a couple of years ago. One is to just have a straight sales tax, which is what we do, and the other one is for 30 days or less, David?
Correct.
So there's a separate one. So when you compare us with other cities, since we only have the one, you got to make sure that both of those other taxes are included.
Correct. Nope,
Okay.
I completely understand what you're
Okay.
saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is almost every other city has a bed tax, which I believe gets the people under 30 days.
Yep.
And then the other grabs over 30 days, and
Yep.
we're missing that
The
piece.
the people that are under 30 days also get taxed at 5.5%.
Correct, but that still puts us lower than many cities here in Arizona, to include Bisbee, which is at 13.05 with everything included. And we're at 11.55.
That's all taxes.
This is from this year, January 2018.
Well, I don't understand. When you say Bisbee is 13, that includes. Are we just talking hotel and bed tax?
We're just talking hotel and bed tax. So, for example, Bisbee does 3.5% for bed tax, 3.5% for the city tax. County tax is 0.55%,
That
state
should- yeah.
tax 5.5%, and that hooks them out to
So total tax on a
13
motel
point-
room would be 13,
13.05%.
and our total tax is 11.
11.55%.
Okay. And that was one of my concerns when this was first brought up, is if we're looking at being competitive and staying competitive, we want to make sure we're a little bit lower than Bisbee. We're a little bit lower than Benson, which is, there are people I know from talking to people coming out to the post, there are people for some reason want to stay in Benson
Sure.
for travel issues and that kind of stuff. And do you have any idea what Benson's is?
11.55%.
And ours is what?
11.55.
5.5. Okay.
However, the way that we are allocating it right now just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and so I'm just asking how we're allocating that 5.5%.
When you say allocating, what do you mean?
How are we putting it into, I understand that it all goes into the general fund.
That's
What
correct.
percentage of that are we putting towards marketing and economic development and all of that?
Well, we'd have to calculate that, Councilmember Wolf. Basically, the revenue all does go into the general fund, and then it's allocated to the marketing division. Well, we don't really take it and set it aside for marketing and economic development. I think that's a better way to explain it. We just develop a budget based on the programs and needs that the division heads recommend going forward, and then allocate the funds there. So there's no real direct tie between the hotel tax and the budgets of those two areas.
And I guess my question is, shouldn't there be? And I guess that's a policy question, that's not a question
Well,
for you.
it is. I wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it reduces your flexibility, not necessarily ours, but your flexibility.
Yeah, and it's-
Depending on how we decided to do it.
Well, the question then is, in my mind, I'm just kind of spitballing this, is if we're going to take a special interest, and that's essentially what we're talking about, even though that's probably not the right phrase, and we're going to dedicate X amount of their money, what's looked at as their money, but it's really not their money, it's the
I
public
understand that.
funds. And we're going to dedicate it. Well, what other entities are we going to do that with as well, and try to deal with a need for a perceived positive need for the community that's maybe in the best interest of a particular industry.
I think the difference between that is that many cities in Arizona already do that, except for us. So I am not here, and again, I'm not at this point proposing anything. I'm just asking that we really think about how we're taxing and if there's a better way to allocate those funds. Because if we did it again like Bisbee did, we could bump it based on last year's numbers. My understanding, it would be about approximately $163,000 per percent. So if we bumped it to 3.5 and 3.5, we could fund from the bed tax anything from marketing to economic development to leisure, things that bring people in. It would mean decreasing the city tax to, again, an even, so it'd be 3.5 and 3.5, and it would bring us up to 13.05.
I think that's an interesting proposal, but I would like to see David run the numbers, because one of the reasons we switched from at one time we had both, and they were different rates, and when we got rid of one and broadened it, we actually got more revenue.
And
So,
I would
mean,
never
we need
suggest
to
we do
look
it
at those
without the numbers. I'm just at this point throwing it out there since we're talking budget discussions at this point.
And the other thing is, we don't have a quote transaction privilege tax or sales tax for the hotels, right?
Correct.
We just have this specific tax.
Well, that's,
No, it's all
no, that's not.
transaction
It's all
But the
TPT.
thing is, this rate is
This
a
is
different rate.
It's a different
It's a
rate than the
different
ones
rate.
that all got done with the sales tax increase
Mr.
a
Mayor.
couple years ago.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Just to go back, we used to have, the separate tax, and when the council determined to put it all into transaction privilege tax, it was primarily at the request of the hotel owners who there were a lot of difficulties in terms of reporting and calculating the tax for the under 30-day stayers versus the over 30-day stayers. And they're the ones that actually came and requested of the council to
Want the
change it
simplicity.
to the transportation or the TPT at that time. Now, maybe that landscape has changed out there in terms of what the hoteliers are thinking about that. I don't know, but really the easiest way to handle your proposal, if the council is interested in it, Councilmember Wolf, is to, add 1% in this base budget before you actually vote on the tentative, because you can't raise the budget amount after that. We can set it aside for, whatever purposes in the budget as an expenditure to offset, and then you can take up the actual implementation of that at a later date or not to. And if you don't, then we just simply don't spend that money.
Would it carry over?
Well, it wouldn't be implemented until the council actually voted to him.
But if we voted and then couldn't come to an agreement, and sorry, I've been listening, I'm not jumping in. I've been listening as I was driving over. But if we were to vote on we're talking about 1%, right?
It would be the equivalent, if we did 3.5 and 3.5, it would be the equivalent of about 1.5. So we'd be talking approximately $200,000 based on last year's actuals.
Okay. So if we did that and let's say we didn't come to an agreement on how it was to be used, would it carry over is what I'm asking?
Well, just because it appears in the budget and you vote on it in the budget, Councilmember Gray, it doesn't mean the money is there. You would actually have to separately vote to implement the tax.
To amend the tax, right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So if you then do that, then we can calculate how much that would be, and then place it against whatever items the council would choose to place it against.
And again, I do agree with the mayor. Before we would do any of this, I would like to see some firm numbers, but it does make sense to me. We've been putting so much money into economic development. We've been putting so much money into really bringing our tourism efforts about. Maybe we need to have a dedicated pot of money towards that. And I think included in that should be some things like leisure, such as bringing in tournaments from, instead of everyone traveling to Phoenix, they should come to Sierra Vista. We're way more awesome. So let's let them come here. And cooler.
We're cooler than you think.
Mayor, I got.
Okay,
What's
so,
the
yes, Greg.
recommend?
No, so here's what I think. I think that the longer we go, and we're almost completely affected by what happens to us as a result of what happens to the fort, federal spending. We're a couple years out from another election when it comes to the real big federal. May even see changes this year. We don't know how that's going to go. I think we have to start kind of taking control of our own destiny here a little bit. And what that means, we have to find those people who are willing to kind of take on the burden. And the hotel industry is stepping up. It's not going to hit our local residents. This isn't something that's an additional tax on the local population unless they're choosing just to stay in a hotel for whatever reason.
And sometimes I do that.
Your business. But what we can do is take. I do like the idea of setting the money aside if we can generate new funds, because we have to start building our infrastructure. And if our big play, and I think it is this kind of sports tourism, getting people here, experiencing the weather, the festivals that we do, the sips and skies, all of that matters, then we need to have the resources and the tools to continue to build out the infrastructure without having to worry about are we going to be able to afford the PSPRS payment? And money's got to be protected because those people are the ones that's what they need it for in order for them to be successful. So that's kind of what the request in the play is, I think. I'm not afraid of a tax hike when it comes to something like that. It's not going to hit our local population. So I think it's something to really consider, but what I would also ask council to consider is that none of that money goes to paying for salaries or pensions or trips or printing costs or anything like that per se, but it goes back into rebuilding, improving, and modernizing the infrastructure we need in order to get the people out here to begin with, or the events, marketing the events that we're doing locally. That's what I think.
Any other discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. Craig, are you advocating, and again, thanks to my wonderful cell coverage in my neighborhood, I was coming in and out, but are we advocating that money, of course, it would go back into the general fund, but it would be marked into, say, for example, leisure and libraries budget, or
I think
economic development's budget, or public relations budget?
No, I don't know if, well, as long as there's assurances, a long-standing assurance that money's not going to be rolled over to hire a new person. or to pay for something else. I think so to be very clear, at least this is my opinion, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but what I think is, what the hotels are saying is that they're buying into what it is that we're trying to do. I mean, I've sat in some of the meetings, you've sat in some of the meetings. I think they like the direction that we're going with the leadership that we have in place and the emphasis on the tourism. I think they like it. But what they also know is that if they're willing to step up and say, we're willing to take on more of this burden, we're willing to take the risk on as an industry, but we want that money to go to things that the city will control and own, but it's got to be things that are going to help bring more people in and fill up their rooms.
Okay.
That is something that I think is a clear trade-off. And other cities do it. They just do it in the form of a straight bed tax that goes to those things. I travel all over the place. I was down in Houston the other day for an energy conference. I'm looking at my hotel bill. It's got like 3 different taxes on it, and they're saying this tax is going to pay for the stadium. This tax is going to pay for this. This tax is going to go pay for that. I'm not saying we have to get to that extent, and we won't. But I do think that we can't keep shoving off the costs or the costs that we need or the money we need to pay for modernizing our fields, bringing these events in. I would have loved, and I'm preaching now a little bit. That's okay. I'm doing good. Here's the thing that I know. I know that when we brought the bull riding stuff out here a couple months ago, that had 2,500 people out here. And I know they were working really good with Laura to try to figure it out, but she's running out of money. She just didn't have it to make it work. Imagine how many more people we could have got out here with just a little bit more marketing of it, or to be able to get your really cool lights, or help them out with a portable stage or something. That's an investment. So I think we have to just secure it. And what I'm looking for is the assurances of we're not just going to turn around and take that money and just hire another person. Let's use it in complete projects and get things done. That's what I think that we can do.
Okay. Are we going to be able to talk about this more tomorrow, Mayor? With actual numbers in hand, seeing what the numbers are.
Maybe not tomorrow, but in
Probably
2
not gonna be
weeks.
tomorrow. and the question I got for Councilwoman Wolf is, you said the Hotel Association hasn't quite gotten all their guys together to say, yes, this is an 85% recommendation, or everybody 100%. Or whatever it's going to be.
That's correct, and I don't want to push that out there. I know the majority of them are, but I don't want to sit here and.
So what you're saying is generally the industry is behind it.
Correct.
The local folks are, and they see the benefit.
Correct.
And
And
I was
I think
talking about
numbers
numbers
would
on
be-
our end.
I think
Our
numbers
end.
would be helpful.
But again, knowing that is important. We need to see numbers on our end, and I'm not sure Chuck's going to be able to get them in the short amount of time.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we do have a number. The 163,000 number for 1% is an accurate number. On our end, in terms of what you're doing today, it's pretty easy to go ahead and add the 1% for the full year at 163. We can set up some sort of a special revenue fund that fences it off, and then include it in the tentative budget resolution. And once you feel that we've done enough homework with the hoteliers, then we can go ahead and proceed with the resolutions necessary to implement it.
So just so I understand, so what we would do is, because my understanding is if it's not in the budget, we can't spend it.
That's right.
Even if Miss Mary Lou comes in and gives us $10, if it's not in the budget, we can't spend it. So what we would have to do is, if we're thinking about this at all in any way, go ahead and put it in the budget. We're not necessarily increasing it at this time, but it would be there if we choose to do so and we get more information back from the hotels. Is that correct?
And then,
Okay.
we can develop some recommendations for you guys in terms of specifics on how you want it spent, and get that direction then from the council, once you move forward with it.
And again, it's a placeholder,
Okay.
and
Just a
then what
placeholder
happens
at this
is,
Are you okay
with the tax debate would actually be separate.
Okay. I have no problem with that.
David, do you have a
And
comment?
to clarify, it would increase the budget because this is a new revenue source and a new expenditure source, so the budget would go up by the
Well,
160.
this document would increase.
this
but
document
we
would
can
By
still do that.
$163,000.
Yes, this would add to the
Right.
the
But-
$42,000 change we discussed
So
before.
we would,
Need to do that now, not, when we
If we
can't
don't do it now,
is
we'd
after
have to
the
wait
28th.
another
That's-
year.
Another year to do it. Okay, so let me understand it. We are putting it in the budget to discuss at a later time, but it's already there as a placeholder, so if we approve it, we can implement it immediately.
That's correct.
Okay, okay, I'm good with that.
Any other discussion?
Nope.
Well, yeah, let's just finish this first. Does anybody have any other discussion on this item, and we have a consensus? Put it in the budget? No objection? Okay, go ahead, next subject.
It's not, really not a new subject. I want to go back to what Craig was talking about with the sign for the airport. I understand that piece, but we also, to repeat, I was just saying, I understand we're looking at putting the airport sign wherever it needs to go in order for it to happen. Did we finish that conversation about what other things? Yesterday it came up that, was there a list of things that the various commissions had proposed that anybody pulled together? Do we have a list of the other proposals, other than the black box theater? Was there anything else? And
Well, there were shade structures from Arts and Humanities. There were ADA improvements from Cody.
Do we have that list
And
wasn't in here?
there was also the unfunded larger projects that we saw yesterday in the document. But it seems like this is a good time to say, are there other things that we want to bring up or want to consider that perhaps had not been funded in the, why do I always lose the CIP?
CIP.
Yeah.
Capital improvement plan.
Capital improvement. I always want to say
Go
capital
to the slide that
improvement.
actually has the topics you're talking about, because there's a slide for
The
it.
capital, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought we kind of left that yesterday without delving into it too deeply, other than the black box theater. I personally don't have anything else that I'm going to put on there right now, but
Well,
or want to talk about
and
pulling forward.
one thing I'll mention too is, and on this is specifically the black box theater. When we look at projects like $8 million for the Oscar E. Roon renovation, there's potential when that is designed to put a facility like that, so it really needs to be a multi-purpose. It should not be a dedicated room, but a room that's capable of doing more than one things. That needs to be, the black box theater needs to be considered in the design.
And we shouldn't
So-
lose that
Yeah.
thought when we come up to dealing with that $8 million project. But I was thinking of if there were smaller projects that we either wanted to exchange for something that was already funded or that you've proposed to be funded, or if we wanted to add
Let
any
me ask a
more.
question. You said you didn't have anything in particular. Does anybody
Particular,
else have
right.
anything in particular? I know we've already talked about the sign, we talked about the potential,
Can we still go back in and,
Where's that?
Are we talking about capital improvements,
Capital
anything in
improvements, yeah, projects.
particular?
I mean, yeah, we're not going to find $8 million. Not without- We're going to cancel a lot of trips and a lot of printing here, Chuck.
You can.
$1 million.
Be an issue.
There's this.
I think the issue here, and we did touch on it lightly yesterday, was the fact that the CIP items and a number of the larger maintenance items, like for the Cove, are at a level. I mean, it's one thing to pull $50,000 and get an airport sign. It's another to find $500,000 to renovate the Cove this year, and that's really where we're at.
Can we go back one slide, please?
We need, additional revenue or some sort of a plan that incrementally gets us to where we need to be in order to implement some.
All right, so I asked for 50,000, and we found it by taking it out of the dirt pile, which is great. That tells me that there's probably still a little bit of money sitting around here in this budget that we could probably look at. The $60,000 for the emission control devices for the fire station bays, how critical is that?
Right now, we have a passive system in every station. It's just fans that, when the doors go up, when the trucks fire up and the doors go up, we have exhaust fans that basically suck the air out of the apparatus base. And what we're asking for is, like they have at Fleet, is the hoses that actually attach. It's a positive emissions control instead of
Does it make
passive.
the conditions obviously safer for our guys?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I question that. And the reason I question that is because I spend a lot of time working in Army motor pools, unfortunately. And it's the same thing. If you got garage doors open, you got good ventilation, you're gonna have exhaust leaving properly unless there's an issue with the design of the bays. But when you have doors on both ends go up, if you're not operating in sub-zero temperatures where you have to have the doors shut and operate the vehicle, you really don't need that system. As long as you can open the doors and you have ventilation. Now, would it be nice? Would it be really nice to have this just like they do in the maintenance bays? Yeah, it would be. I think it's a nice to have, not a need to have, Chief. And that's we're going to have a disagreement on that because you do have procedures already. Because I've seen you guys do it before you start trucks. The doors go up, fans turn on, and then they turn on the engines, generators, whatever else you need to do. And so you got the safety procedures down, and I don't see it as a large challenge. It would be nice to have if we had 60 grand, absolutely. Is it an absolute need? Not in my mind.
Mayor, cancer's the #1 killer of firefighters.
Yeah.
And if you look at the walls of the fire stations, it's diesel dust. It's in there.
Yeah.
It's if it's on the walls of the apparatus, it's in the air that we're breathing out there as well. We do everything we can to control that, but honestly, I won't sit and argue with you about it. But if you look at the bays, that dust is there, and it's getting into our fire stations. When the doors open, no positive ventilation to keep it out of the stations as well. So.
Yeah. But to me, to me it's at least a marginal system. I understand the health concerns because we've dealt with those as well in the Army. So I just
So I'll get back.
not really in favor of that particular item.
Where's this?
I,
Where am I missing?
I worked in Army motor pools too, and I hear what you're saying, and I agree with having the vents open. I don't know enough about what, how that's set up with you. I apologize for that, but I imagine this is on here for a reason. I think you have good justification, so I'm not going to try to weigh in on that part. But I guess the principle of the matter is, here's what I think. I imagine if we were able to find 50,000 once and it was out of the dirt mound, I'd imagine that we may still be able to scrape 50,000 or 30,000 or 60,000, whatever it costs to do this. If we can take a really hard look, and again, I'm coming back to staff because I don't want to go through every single line item. But I bet if we work together, we could probably find enough money to scrape out of this current budget without doing any more tax stuff, and find something to help out the firefighters with the emission control devices potentially, or maybe something else. So I guess what I'm asking staff and city management and council for support is, can you find me 60,000 in soft money that is normally going to go to a trip or two, some printing, some supplies that maybe we can wait on so we can get projects done while we can get projects done. And I think it's a good project.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
I do believe that my perception is that staff will find what you direct them to find. I think the balancing act is we've already swept $50,000, not swept, but we have repurposed $50,000. At what point are you asking or directing in the form of asking, and by doing that, degrading these core missions? It's my understanding. Ultimately, council obviously has, we have discretion and we make the ultimate decision, but I think asking to find an additional $60,000 out of a budget that is budgeted with the input of staff already, might be too much on one side.
I concur, and that's why I'm leaving it up to staff to see if they can find it, because I don't want to come in here and put them on this. But look, we can come through each one of these things and ask for everything by line. I am immensely interested as to why some things go up by double. You know, why do office supplies go up by double? I imagine there's a really good reason, but out of respect to the staff and maybe just to the forum here, we're getting things done, and I don't want to go that direction. It's just my prerogative at the moment. If we were to do it tomorrow, I might be in a different mood. But I think what I am asking is, if we've got something like this, and it's a compelling case where we have firefighters who have dust on their walls, and they're asking for a device to clean that up. I know it's not currently in the budget, but if staff can say we can find another 60 to get that project done, I guess what I'm leaning on is I would like to see more projects get done versus. And look, I'm sorry, staff. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, be belligerent. You're all great. I don't really care about your trips. I don't care about your office supplies as much, and I don't. I care about taking care of. If you've got dust on the walls, I want it taken care of. If we can find a way to generate revenue from, this economic and development investment or this tourism investment, then we need to do it. That's what I care about. So that's why I'm going to keep coming back to these other things. I imagine there's a good reason for all of it. I'm just not as interested. Not my priority.
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
All of the unfunded projects tend to be the higher ones that tend to go more towards bonding than scraping it out of what we can find. Is that correct?
That's
Except
correct.
for I know you found the 60,000, but that's probably the lowest one that's on here out of all of these.
Yeah, just a little background too. While the budget was being constructed, during most of that time, we were very concerned about the ability to balance and were able to find a little bit of room, primarily due to the fact that our PSPRS contribution came in a little lower than was originally given to us by PSPRS, so that was a couple $100,000. And there were some items there, and the chief made a compelling case on firefighter safety, and we just placed a priority on the scuba devices this year for them because they were old and just simply didn't have the funds to get to this particular project. So, certainly, if it's an item of interest, and, employee safety is always an item of interest to us, it's just a matter of whether or not there's enough funds to cover all these things. So, certainly it would be a priority next year, but we did take into account the chief's needs for firefighter safety in the budget. It's just we didn't get to this one.
And that is a good point, Chuck. It will stay on the list. And
So
it
the
would
money
be
that
a
would've
project,
been-
would be a project for next year as well. So we can take care of it.
What I'm telling
eventually.
you is the money that would have gone to police and fire in the form of public safety retirement system
Well, yeah, I understand.
went back in
But the other
in
point I was
terms of
making
capital.
for this year, if we don't spend the 60, it remains on the list, so we can spend and take care of the safety next year, and then when we prioritize the list of next year's budget.
Well, it's not a high dollar item, so, certainly, if
Probability
room
that-
comes up during the course of the year, we'll note that is a council priority, and we'll try to take care of it.
So, but I think then what we do is we run into the issue now of having to go through line by line and now seeing if, look, here's the frustration maybe a little bit, and this has been positive, so I'm trying to be positive. We get the budget. The detail that we get is the detail that we get, and look, I've gone through and talked to people and did all that and found out what it is, but I'm seeking clarity. So, for example, why does page 106, and I'm sorry, Tony, I'm going to single you out for a second, but what does $41,000 in office supplies for economic development consist of? And if it's something that's worthwhile, that's great. But if it's not, then I think it's worthwhile. But if it's not to the priority of fixing something else, then that's up to us to go through and do that. And I just don't know if we've, anyways, go ahead.
No, Councilmember Mount, actually, I wanted to answer that earlier. So of the 41,000, 1,000 is general fund dollars.
Mm-hmm.
The other 40,000 is grant money. So it isn't available to do other things. So if you break it down into what it's used for, really at the end of the day, the 40,000 would be federal reimbursement for computers, office supplies that would assist the technical assistance program. So I asked the same question because I went down and went, why do I have $41,000? Because it is big. So again, so when you break it out different funding, that's where that other $40,000 comes into.
That's very reasonable answer, and I thank you. So we move on to the next ones. And so what I don't want to do is go through the exercise of calling everybody up and doing that, but we can. What I'm simply asking is there something in here? So for example, I'll pick on public affairs. 111. So training and travel went from $5,000 to $16,000 over a 2-year period. Why? I know that's not grant money, at least I don't believe it is. So where's the requirement for an extra, I imagine it's an extra 3 or 4 trips? So that's my question, is do we need that extra 10,000? And if we don't, if we can get them back to where they were just 2 years ago, then that's $10,000 that can go over to something else.
Page 111's not in here.
No. They're all the unfunded projects.
That we're
The
asking
first
for.
for
Let's see it in the mayor's
prioritized by
book.
staff for the next 5 years.
Let me see it. Okay.
They don't, it's years 6 through 10. So
I don't want to speak to this authoritatively
Sure.
because Judy obviously puts together the budget, so I'm not the subject matter expert on this. But I believe it's a shuffling of priorities. I think we shifted some funds from another area, the specialized supplies, to help cover for a different priority that we identified, but I wouldn't be able to speak to what particular trips or items were added to that.
Okay. And trying to see where specialized items were transferred.
Specialized
I see.
supplies was reduced by about 6,000 some, I believe.
All right, I got it.
Yeah.
So then let me ask you this. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, the $35,000 for the new magazines. Is that general fund money? All right, can we, so that $35,000, does that include just the printing, the publication costs, or is that for the actual workup and the creation and of all that? From what I understand, I thought it was just for printing.
Yes.
Okay.
If any internal work that is done by an employee doing that, that is not in the budget as the expense. So that would be, if Judy had the quote for $35,000, that's the bid from an outside agency to actually do the printing and any mock-up that they would do on our behalf.
All right, here's
That's
what
a check written.
Here's an example of what I recommend as a policy decision by council. I recommend that we continue to do the magazine piece, and for this year, make it entirely online and accessible through social media, our website, everything else. Cut the $35,000 in print costs for magazines, set it aside, and now all we have to do is go find another $25,000 to pay for the firefighters to have this last piece of equipment that they're asking for. So that is a policy decision by council. I don't know if printing up $35,000 worth of magazines is worth it. I imagine they're going to end up in the same recycle bins in the garbage where most of these others are. But I do think there's a value for the content and the information, and it belongs online where the most amount of people can get it. And then we can revisit that next year and find out if it's worth the squeeze versus the apparatus for the fire department. That's a suggestion of how I think we could look at some of these issues.
Are you recommending that change be made now?
Absolutely.
As a commitment
Yeah.
for future?
I'm
Well,
absolutely
I'm
not.
taking it as an example of what we could do in the future.
I would like to actually make that a recommendation right now, and then we only have to find
Okay,
25K.
well, let's discuss that. Anybody have any comments?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So we hired Judy.
Yep.
And I'm not sure, is she just not here? Is that what it is? Adam's representing her? It's okay, Adam. You don't
yeah,
have to come up.
She's not available right now.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. I'm not going to make you answer questions. So she feels and sees a need for us to have those magazines, and $35,000 is not a lot of money. I mean, I know when we're looking at other things, it can be. My opinion on that is that she asked for those for a particular reason. She's done her market research. She thinks and feels like that's something that's important. So I'm not okay with just arbitrarily taking that away because we feel like it might go into the garbage.
No, I know it'll go into the garbage, but
Won't
I
go into the garbage in my house.
okay.
So,
But
Did you have something?
Yes, I did. It's my opinion. Well, I should say I had similar thoughts when I first got on council. I hate paper. I don't use that budget book. I use it online. And I had that same perception. Why do we need so much paper? Why isn't everything online? And I came to discover that there is a large segment of the population who prefers paper, and not just prefers it, but does either not have access to a computer or a mobile device or does not know how to use it. And so by only having such an informational piece of literature online, we are excluding a large segment of the population that is actually very likely to use city services.
and I would like to add on to that. With my parents, the world has ended if they don't get their newspaper every day. But not only that, when they send off for visitor information, they don't want a link back to a website. They want a mail-in of something that they can flip through to see where they're going to see. So I think Judy has proven herself with enough research and with enough of what she's shown us that she can do, that if she thinks this is important, I think it's important.
And I'm just going to jump on this, Craig. I appreciate the fact that we're going to a great new world where everybody's online and everybody reads everything online, et cetera. I will tell you that the community generationally is not there yet. I think we've had some good progress in weighing into that field, and we need to do more. But again, $35,000 for the magazine is not a big number, and people want to have something in their hands. So I can't completely agree with you.
I do appreciate all your perspectives, but let me kind of condense this back down because I think it's getting to be a bit of a straw man. I'm talking about $35,000 this year for this particular magazine. I'm not saying getting rid of all paper, and I'm not saying get rid of the work that goes into it. Yeah. What I'm simply saying is offset it this year, post it up, and actually let's post it up and see what it looks like before we spend $35,000 and see what the reaction is. I would also argue that I'm not saying to get rid of all paper for the sake of getting rid of all paper, and I'm certainly not.
I'm talking specifically about the $35K.
Yeah, and I would say that $35K, I've heard all three of you say it's not a lot of money. What I'm saying,
I didn't say that.
No, I'm the only one that said that.
Actually, you just.
No, I'm the only one
He's the only one that said that.
Okay, well, in this case, I do think 35,000 is. I apologize. I do think 35,000 is a lot of money, and I do think, comparatively speaking, to $60,000 that got left out because it couldn't be funded, is over 50% of the needed cost to fix that problem. And I know that that's a project, which means that once it's installed and once it's there, it's done. And that magazine, unless the idea is to do a single magazine one time and print it out there, then people are going to come back every year asking for $35,000 more worth of magazines because it's a magazine. That means it's going to get published and updated and updated and printed. So your $35,000 really over the scale of time,
it's going to turn into a lot more.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I hope it's a great success. But what I really do want is to knock this project out first, because I don't know when we're going to get the money to do it again.
Craig, you are referring to the emission control devices and the
I'm using that as an example.
Yeah, that's what he's talking
But yes, I am talking about that. It's 60,000. I can find 35,000 right now with your support, and then I think staff can find another 25. And it's done. It's done.
Well, what I'm hearing is you don't necessarily have complete consensus of council, but not everybody's weighed in yet.
I have a question for Chuck, but I think Christine had her hand up before me.
Go ahead, Christine.
I guess my question is, and I do agree that there is a generational difference in some things in our community. I guess my question would be, if we went back and pulled, let's say, 10 and put everything online, how many hits and how much information are people pulling, I know, off of online? And is it getting more and more to that way? And I don't know. And if that is information that we can get, then we can start pulling that a little bit more from this budget.
We actually have our metrics that are on here, which is great, and we know that, I don't know how many magazines we're able to print for $35K. Do you have an idea?
Councilmember Mount, Mr. Mayor, what you're speaking to is actually our Vistas newsletter. Would be switching formats potentially. And to be completely honest, we're still evaluating that, so it may not be an actual magazine. And that figure could change some based on the quotes and negotiations we're going through. So the idea is to switch to a quarterly format, which actually reduce the amount of copies we're printing in total, and also try to keep costs down while doing our best to create the most engaging product we can. And we're currently evaluating how to do that.
Well said.
Okay. So we're not sure of the scope. When are you expecting to have it delivered?
So the next edition of Vistas will be the so the basically the fall quarterly edition, August through October.
So you'll have the new format by then?
Yes. So we basically we were prepared to move forward with a particular vendor, but then there was an issue with the contract, a particular federal rule that they basically disagreed with the wording, but we were required to include in the contract. So based on that, we are reassessing the other options currently.
So you're getting almost 1 million hits on your webpage. You're getting 5,000. This is millions. So 5.2 million on social media. And do you have a rough estimate of how many magazines you can print off for 35,000?
It's really based on those quotes, and to be completely honest, I don't know that we will move forward with the magazine format, as I said. And I wouldn't want to speak to those costs or those figures without them in front of me. But I will say that, in our opinion, there is still value in that printed product, and that our recommendation would be to retain that on a quarterly schedule, to try to reduce costs and keep printing as low as we can, while still, I mean, there is an element of even recouping costs in terms of leisure programs and making sure we properly market everything to the community, and also strategically reinforce our communications across multiple platforms. When you're talking about multiple impressions or even hitting the same people multiple ways, I do feel it is important still to have a variety of mediums, including social media, websites, even printed products still do retain value.
I want to ask Adam a question while you're there. When we talk about hits on your performance standards that you've laid out in the past year, that's all media, electronic media, everything from City Page to Facebook to all the other things, all the other platforms we're on?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mount, I'm not sure exactly which figure Mr. Mount was referring to, but yes, we can track by a particular page. I could look back and see hits we've gotten on our newsletter that, based on how it was shared.
But again, that's
social
the
media.
newsletter, the Facebook, and all those other platforms. And what we're talking about here is the actual money to print a document that used to go out in the paper, but now is going to go out quarterly in some format.
And we are still looking for quotes for direct mailing. We do feel that would be a more effective means of distribution potentially. Yeah. But yeah, I believe the figure Mr. Mount was quoting was for the total website views for sierravista.gov. We have multiple websites and multiple platforms. We can go in and do a more comprehensive report if there's anything in particular you would like to see traffic on. But while I do think, obviously, the world's changing and social media is incredibly important, and delivering content in a variety of ways is incredibly important, but locally, we've still seen value in the printed product, and I think it is still important to retain that.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting getting rid of the printed product.
Right.
The 35K, as it was explained a couple weeks ago, was an increase to the current cost, correct?
I don't have the figure in front of me, so I would hate to speak to that.
Well, if we're talking about the magazine, one of the reasons we're going to the quarterly is to save money.
Yeah.
But the 35K was an increase to the current cost in printing. So that's what I thought was briefed a couple weeks ago. Am I mistaken by that?
Not how I heard it.
Well,
Can you repeat that, Mr. Mount? We were looking at some other numbers.
I believe it was you also who gave kind of the briefs, and I apologize, but the 35K specific to this was an increase from what our current cost for printing that publication would be to go to a magazine format.
Councilmember Mount, I may be able to speak to some of that. We actually experienced an increase in cost based on what the Sierra Vista Herald was able to do in terms of printing. We had to switch formats to the larger tab format, which would increase our costs anyway. And we were considering changing the way we produce this anyway, and this kind of spurred us to get quotes and explore our options to find the most cost-effective way to still retain that product and deliver it in a method that we think will have the longest shelf life and also get to the most people that we want to get to.
And Mr. Mount, I think we had $24,000 budgeted for the current Vistas. As Adam said, that cost was going to go up anyway because the newspaper changed the size of their newspaper, and so
you just said
we were going to have to change it to that. So it increased to $32,000 for the anticipated new publication.
From 24.
I'll go back and double check my. I believe you. I'm going to double check my notes. All right.
Okay.
Rachel?
I think we've sufficiently put Adam in the hot seat long enough. Chuck. So we're looking at the emission. We're still talking about the $60,000 and trying to find money for that, right?
Yeah, and let me reiterate, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't necessarily want to kind of go through step by step, because this is what it takes in order to do the rigor, in order to figure that out.
It starts getting a little. Yeah.
So and thank you, Adam. Again, an example, you were the first page I pulled up, and that was the example there. Here's my thing. As clearly stated by two departments, you know where your costs are and where the things are that are needed. I believe everybody's done their due diligence. I'm not trying to cast shade on that. What I'm trying to do is figure out, can we find $60,000 to take care of the firefighters, and as an example, and if you can find an extra $200,000, then I'd love to do the ball field as well, but I'll start small.
Can we stick with the 60,000? Let me ask this question first. Chuck, when we bid out on projects, a lot of times I've noticed that when we estimate a bid come in, we don't always, the bid is always lower than what we've estimated for, right? Not always. In a lot of cases, I'm going to say, okay, let's say sometimes, okay? Let's just say sometimes. And in the scheme of all of that, when we have money left over from those projects where the bid was higher than the actual cost of the job, does that money go back into the general fund?
Yeah, it just stays there. We simply don't spend it.
If we had enough of those that came in that equaled the $60,000, would we be able to then put, because I have every faith that at the mid-year we're going to see $60,000, would we be able to use that then to put new emission control devices in the fire station bays? Or is there something precluding us from doing that? And this is a serious question.
No, I understand that, and I think I need to answer that, Councilmember Gray, in terms of the context under which we're talking about, these particular projects, because as I mentioned before we had final numbers and state shared revenues and PSPRS and all that, none of these projects were in the budget. Okay,
Right.
We had a zero capital budget.
Right.
Okay, so when the money became freed up because we got the numbers and it was favorable to us and our sales tax numbers looked better, we started adding these capital items into the budget. Okay, so in talking with one thing that we're on is the extra $300,000 that we put into the budget for the scuba and the radios that the fire department needs because they're aging 25-year-old equipment. That's only half of what they need. That's
Okay.
that's phase one. Okay, so we have to make a priority because budget is the allocation of scarce resources.
That's right.
And with all the resources aren't there to do everything we would like to do, obviously. So, next year you'll probably see another line item for the fire department to complete that process,
All right.
as well as do some of these other things. Certainly, $60,000, as Ms. Ash correctly pointed out. If you ask us to find $60,000, we're going to find $60,000 because that's a council priority, and we're going to do what the council directs us to do. Wherever that goes, whatever, comes out of O&M budgets or other capital projects to do that, we will make sure that gets done. And we can do that within the course of a day if you give us the day to do it.
Right, but haven't we already made a policy, and Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think this might have been your baby,
Yes, ma'am.
to come to
6 months. Yeah.
every 6
That's right.
months, to come to us to show us, this is how much we estimated this project will cost, or this is how much we estimated this employee will cost, and
Yeah.
this is how much it cost
It was
us
the fund
more
balance
or
savings, yeah.
less.
Yeah.
I already thought we had that in place. So if that is in place, and you don't need to do it in a day, and I'm certainly not asking you busy guys to do it in a day, but if in 6 months when you come to us with that budget update and we see that there were projects that we had $60,000 or whatever, I'm just using this as an example because it's what we're talking about. But if we had $60,000 we could use, as long as it doesn't exceed the cap of the budget, we can spend it out of the general fund on
Right.
the things that need to be spent on, such as emission control devices. I keep having to read it because I keep forgetting what it is.
I concur and I agree. And again, I'm not trying to make this overly. Here's the thing. I said it yesterday, and I'm not trying to get down into the eaches, but this is on. And I love your statement about a budget of managing scarce. Page 19. So here's the criticality that I think that we're in, and I'm looking at an opportunity because, as Chuck correctly pointed out, we have a bit of a break with the PSPRS, with the state shared funding. But look at this graph on 19. So what you see over time is you see the capital the ratio of the amount of money we can spend on capital continues to decrease while the amount we're spending on personnel and O&Ms continue to kind of come in there to restrict it. So what I'm arguing is that one of our scarce resources we have right now is time. And we have a bit of a window. It'll be some sacrifice for some in order for us to get as many projects done as possible because you could lose that window as soon as next year. Depending on what the state does, depending on what the PSPRS does, depending on what happens with the federal government. That's the criticality that we're facing. And so what I'm asking council to look at is a policy decision, and not to play the eaches, not to beat up Adam. I know he's a great fan of mine. What I'm talking about is we have to make some sacrifices right now to adapt to the current situation. We have some extra money right now that we weren't expecting. My recommendation as a policy decision from council is to get as many projects done that are capital improvement projects as possible because there is no guarantee that next year is going to allow us to do it. And all the data and the evidence proves that out. That's my final shot, and I'm not saying anything else for the rest of the night.
Can we hold you to it?
Are we batting men here?
Okay, let me see if I can try to sum up. We appreciate your passion, Craig, believe me. And I guess the question is, are we gonna ask the city manager to look for another? We already found 50.
We did.
We're gonna ask him to ask for the 60, or we're gonna wait.
Mount Dew, excuse me.
Yeah.
I would like to just weigh in with the simple comment that I believe it would be inappropriate for us to do this, take away that $35,000 now from Public Information Office. However, and this is probably what we need to do, is change the way we approach dealing with the budget. And rather than seeing this in the last 3 days that it's come forward, or however, we come up with a different way of weighing in on what's really important to us to take care of when we go through the CIPs and any other areas of the budget. So if that helps any, that's my input, just to leave it as it is this year. And part of what, I think it was Alicia who said, or maybe it was Rachel.
We look
I
so
confuse
much
the
alike.
two of them all the time. That I trust that Judy has made, and just because that was the example that we used, but Judy could be any one of our department heads. They've done the best they could, and we've already put a lot of projects in that we have not been able to put in the past. So I remember saying this when I was fairly new on council, I'm trusting, and I still do, trust that our departments are doing the very best they can under the guidance of our management to do the best they can with the dollars that they have. So that's all I'll say on that. But so that means let's wait until next year to make any drastic decisions.
What I'm gonna suggest is what I think I've been hearing. You guys tell me if I'm way off base here. But what I'm hearing is that the $60,000 is obviously an important safety issue for the fire department. I don't think anybody can argue that. It's unfortunate we don't have the funds today to be able to do that. The mid-year review, I think that needs to be a high priority to see if we can figure out a way to come up with the $60K to be able to fund that, Chuck. I think that's what we're hearing. And if we have the ability to do that, I do agree with Councilman Mount. When you do look at the trend charts that are in the budget book, personnel costs keep going up. O&M and the other things that are on there restrict that a little bit. One of the discussions we need to have in our strategic planning session is how are we gonna try to reverse that curve. Whether we do bonding, whether we go out for public votes on certain key items that we feel we need, that needs to be discussed in depth. And that's the other way, is to raise money. But again, when we go into debt, we need to have a source of money to be able to pay that off for certain. And that's again part of that shrinking pot that Mr. Mount mentioned. So we still have some budget challenges ahead of us. So that's kind of where I am. Am I off base, guys?
I agree with you.
I have one other question, though. I don't know what page it's on, but it was in our flyer from yesterday. I just, under the CDBG funding, I didn't see the two projects we approved from the public.
That was last year, wasn't it?
When was that? Didn't we have the Wellness Connection? And Boys and Girls Club.
Right, yeah. So what you've considered is the draft annual action plan. That'll be coming before you for final adoption at your next city council meeting. So once it's finally adopted, those specific line items will be added to the budget.
Okay.
So we're still in a tentative
All right, thank you.
stage.
Okay. Chuck, did you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the graph that Mr. Mount pointed out on page 19 really does put our situation, really defines our situation on one page. You do have personnel costs going up, primarily because of public safety retirement system costs, and trying to get our employees up to snuff with the class comp plan. You see that happening. Revenue has not been going up, so something has to give. What's been giving is capital and O&M to a certain extent. So it's been a 10-year process to get to this point of cutting back and trying to keep personnel numbers down. Less and less capital means more and more deferred maintenance and other problems that will come along with that as a result. So, barring a dramatic change in the local economy where revenues will increase to help us try to reverse this, we're going to have to look at other potential options. They may be either on the revenue or the expense side to try and reverse this trend. So I think that's, where we're at. We didn't get here in 1 year or 1 day. We got here in 10 years. This is a good budget for a lot of reasons, but again, it doesn't address all of our needs and some of the things that have been neglected through the past 10 years.
So in response to that, Chuck, when you mention options and looking at that, I'm not sure if strategic planning is the best time to do that, or maybe we need to lengthen our strategic planning or have a separate budget planning. We need to hear more suggestions about options, and Craig, you have a good handle on some of that, and Chuck, you definitely do. But from management and from others, we need to hear all those options, have those clarified, so that we can make solid decisions related to that. Would you agree with that, Mayor?
Yeah, and in fact, that's basically what I've said. We've got some decisions we need to make through the strategic planning process that'll affect us in the future years. And I'm going to ask any of the last comments on the budget item before we go to I guess we're going to get a brief update on recycling. Anything else on the budget discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Will we have budget discussions tomorrow? Well, what are the next steps? This is done?
Okay, Chuck, why don't you give us the next steps for budget?
Well, as Victoria mentioned, here are the next steps. They were presented yesterday. The tentative budget vote, we will include the revenue item that Councilmember Wolf brought up, and then we will give you that with the proposed changes to the budget as well as the sign, and that will be on June 28th at your regular meeting. Then it goes to 30-day public, publication and comment period, and then the final vote is then your second meeting in July, which is the 26th, and then the completion of the budget process for this fiscal year is the property tax vote, and of course there's no changes there with regards to rates. So,
and one of the other things too is she just left. We need to get some type of schedule from Ms. Wolf about the hotel issue. So that can be, you need to put it on the next steps as well, since it's in the budget.
Okay.
So whatever those procedures need to be, and figure out where we're going to fit them in and share that with council.
We can do that.
So no work session tomorrow?
Right now, no.
Okay.
Okay. So we ready to go to a presentation on recycling?
Yes, we can. We have like a quick little break.
I said I wasn't going to talk anymore.
Yeah,
so
we'll do.
I'm
I'm trying to get this done so we can start the 5 o'clock on time. We'll take
Craig's already sweating from not talking.
No, I'm not. I'm good. Oh yeah, I'm getting nervous. Make sure I'm still here.
What's the 5 o'clock? Is that the
we have a special meeting? Yeah.
Oh, I see. I thought that was at 3. I thought.
Yeah,
I
Sharon.
missed it.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, today's presentation will be brief, and actually I did not put together a formal presentation for you. I just have a few work products that we've been developing over the last few weeks. It's been a busy couple weeks. As you know, our timeline to roll out the new schedule is very short, and I'd like to thank the Public Affairs Office for all the work they've put into this thus far. I need to get switched over to the projector here. Here we go. Pull that down a little bit. Okay, so the consensus of council at the last work session where we talked about recycling was to go to a twice per month pickup. So when we were looking at doing that, we had to make some decisions on whether we were going to stick with, first and third, second and fourth, every other week, and how we were going to handle that. One of the things, and I had noted this before, that has traditionally been a challenge is holiday weeks, particularly holiday weeks where the holiday occurs at the end of the week, because then we have to move people's pickups up by 1 day. It's not so bad if they've got to, put it out a day late. A lot of people will put it on the day of, call us, say, hey, you missed us. And we said, no, we're coming tomorrow. You're a day later this week. And, oh, okay, I'll just leave it out. Where the challenge comes is when they miss it because their pickup is a day early. So one of the things the schedule gave us the flexibility to do is to adjust around those holiday weeks a little bit. And you can see that as we get into November. And so when we were looking at this, we made the decision, rather than sticking with a hard, first and third, or second and fourth, or even every other week, we adjusted as needed to stay away from some of those holidays. The other thing I'll note is the holiday weeks, especially the big ones, Thanksgiving, Christmas, tend to be much heavier on garbage collection as well. So if at all possible, we wanted to keep garbage on those weeks. So for the remainder of 2018, the only week that it gets a little odd is down there at the end of November. You'll notice that we actually go 3 weeks between the recycling pickups, November 15th, 16th, and then the next time we're around is December 6th and 7th on the recycling pickups. We have the 3-week gap because Thanksgiving is right there in the middle, so one of the big trash pickup days, and then the following week we have garbage pickups as well. And in general, this will happen about twice per year. I have 2019 on the other side, and I'm not going to be able to fit it all on there. But again, we have that happen twice per year where we have a 3-week gap between recycling pickups. Everything else looks as you would expect. And again, it's around the holidays. And in talking with the PAO, we think we can work this out with customers. They're going to be great assistance in pushing the information out in a variety of formats so that people know that their schedule is a little bit off during those weeks. But we think this schedule strikes a good balance, providing great service to customers, providing them the service they need on the weeks they need it. Are there any questions on the schedule?
Have we talked about how much cost
Is it-
savings?
You have any, you got a question here about, do we know anything about potential cost savings yet?
No, I do not have information on potential cost savings yet. Right now, while we're rolling this out, we're going to have the same number of routes. The feedback from council and the tasking to me from the city manager is, as the year goes on, to see if there is a way we can consolidate routes. It's going to take a while under the new schedule before we can start figuring out where those savings may be.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Is there going to be any change to the type of recycling that we do pick up?
Yep. Great segue.
I stole your thunder yesterday too, so I apologize.
No problem. Great segue into our new, this is the recycling bin label. Let's see. Go out on this. We'll work with it. But this is the new information that's been generated by the PAO in terms of what we will be accepting and what we won't be accepting. So you can see we are still accepting aluminum cans, tin cans, number 1 and number 2 plastics, and then we tried to get a better picture for corrugated cardboard to more clearly explain to people what corrugated cardboard is, because there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. And then also in the items not accepted, we put food boxes, paper rolls. Those are the other cardboard products that people could easily confuse with corrugated cardboard. And then also we put the other items on there that are currently accepted that we will no longer be accepting. That's the phone books, the magazines, office paper, and then the items that have traditionally been significant sources of contaminants for us. So plastic bags, glass that is placed in blue bins. We accept glass, the Pedro Castro Maintenance Center, but we do not take it within the blue bins. Green waste is huge. We get a lot of green waste put in the blue bins. Again, we accept that at the compost facility, but not within the blue bins. And styrofoam, being a military community, a lot of people moving, and we get a lot of styrofoam, peanuts, and packing materials in the blue bins as well.
Let's assume major success and everybody follows these rules. Are we able to recoup the costs for the recycling program for these particular items if they're actually put through the recycling system?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Mount, the answer to that question would currently be yes, but it's dependent on the markets. These are the materials that the county has told us are marketable, that are still returning a positive value. Basically, the cost to get them up to Tucson, the cost for the county to transport them to Tucson, is less than the amount of revenue they could theoretically get back for these materials. Items like paper still has a value to it, but unfortunately it's less than $10 per ton, which doesn't cover the cost to get it to Tucson.
And I assume that they're going to wait until they have enough of these items collected before they ship up there, so that'll also defray the costs since it'll be less overall shipping up there as well?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Mount, that's correct. They would only run the trucks as often as need be, and if the volume of materials decreases because we're pulling the paper products out of the bin, then they would need to run those less often in theory.
Well, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Mount, the savings that will come, or that we hope will come from this program, and the challenge I gave Sharon was we got to find a route to be able to save as a result of moving to this direction. The other is more on the county side and at the transfer station. There won't be as much shipping. There won't be as much sorting. The product will be cleaner and should be marketable, and that should help hold the tipping fee down for the landfill. So, we're going to see cost savings on that end, which will translate to stabilization in the tipping fee. And hopefully that'll help us be able to keep rates down. The only other way for us to do that here is to reduce routes, and that's our challenge, and that's what we're going to try to do.
Thank you.
That is everything I have for you, so any questions you may have.
Sharon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep charging.
Okay, next up is the report on trips, recent trips, future meetings of the council. Okay, we'll go on to board and commission liaison updates.
I think we have a quorum now for the Cultural Diversity Club as of last night, which is the club. I'm sorry, the Cultural Diversity Commission.
Well, it is a club.
It's been a long day, Mayor. It's a bad day to quit drinking. No, it's thank you for that, though, by the way. So I know Laura gave me the update for that. So we do have a quorum for that will begin work again.
Okay. Any other commission updates?
And I think PNC at their next meeting are going to be looking at some of their bylaws and when they meet and how they meet to make themselves more effective. That'll be coming up.
Yes.
Okay. Future discussion items and council requests? Okay. We're going to go ahead and close the work session. And unfortunately, we got a 5 o'clock start time on the special council meeting. So we have to wait till 5 o'clock. So call the meeting at 5 o'clock.
Twister.
Yeah, Twister, yeah.
Did you adjourn?